My name is David ben Moshe, and I need to tell you what I saw that evening on the Temple Mount. Before they silence me completely, before this truth is buried forever beneath layers of official denials and carefully crafted explanations. I'm not a mystic. I'm not a prophet. I'm a 53-year-old history teacher from the Rehavia neighborhood. A man who has walked the streets of Jerusalem for half a century with the practical mind of someone who believes in what he can see and touch. My father was a scholar, my mother a nurse. We were never the kind of family that spoke of visions or signs. We attended synagogue on Shabbat, yes, but with the quiet devotion of tradition, not the fervor of expectation. That evening, it was the 14th of Tishrei, 5785, just after Sukkot. I had brought my nephew Yonatan to see the old city at sunset. He was 12, visiting from Tel Aviv, and had never truly experienced Jerusalem at that golden hour when the ancient stones seemed to breathe with thousands of years of memory. The air was cooling after a warm autumn day, carrying the scent of za'atar from the market stalls and the distant echo of the call to prayer from a minaret somewhere in the Muslim quarter. We stood at the overlook near the Western Wall Plaza, where tourists and locals alike gathered to watch the light change over the Temple Mount. Yonatan was taking photos with his phone, probably to show his friends back home. I remember smiling at his enthusiasm, remembering my own first real encounter with this view as a boy. "Uncle David," he said, lowering his phone, "do you really believe all the stories about what happened here? The miracles?" I was about to answer with my usual teacher's response, something balanced about faith and history, about the importance of cultural memory, when everything changed. The light shifted. At first, I thought it was just the sun breaking through a cloud, that last brilliant flash before it drops below the horizon. But this was different. The quality of it was wrong. Too pure, too focused. It wasn't coming from the west where the sun was setting, but from directly above the dome of the rock itself. "Uncle David." Yonatan's voice had changed, gone small and frightened. I looked up. What I saw in that moment. I've spent every day since trying to find words adequate to describe it, and I fail every time. It was light, yes, but light that seemed conscious, purposeful. It hovered perhaps 50 meters above the golden dome, pulsing with a rhythm that felt almost like breathing. The color was impossible to name, white, but shot through with threads of gold and something else. Something that made my eyes water to look at directly. Around us, the plaza had gone completely silent. A tourist dropped her camera, and in the absolute stillness, I heard it shatter on the stones. No one moved to help her. No one moved at all. The light began to expand. I felt it before I saw it clearly, a pressure in the air like before a thunderstorm, but infinitely more intense. My chest tightened. Beside me, Yonatan grabbed my arm with both hands, his fingers digging in with desperate strength. All around us, people were sinking to their knees. Some were praying in Hebrew, in Arabic, in languages I didn't recognize. Others were simply crying, tears streaming down their faces as they stared upward. An elderly Arab woman near us was rocking back and forth, repeating, "Allahu Akbar," in a voice cracked with emotion. A Hasidic man in his black coat and hat had removed his glasses and covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs. A young couple, they looked European, probably tourists, were holding each other. The woman's face pressed into her husband's shoulder. The light pulsed again, stronger this time, and I felt it pass through me like a wave. It wasn't painful, but it wasn't gentle either. It felt like being seen, truly, completely seen, in a way I had never experienced. Every hidden thought, every secret shame, every moment of pride or cowardice or love or hatred, all of it exposed and examined in an instant that lasted an eternity. My knees gave way. I didn't decide to kneel. My body simply could no longer support me. Yonatan collapsed beside me, still gripping my arm. I could feel him trembling. Or perhaps that was me. Or perhaps it was both of us. Or perhaps it was the very ground beneath us. "What is it?" someone cried out in English. "What is it?" No one answered. How could we? What words exist for this? The light seemed to be taking shape now. Or perhaps my eyes were simply adjusting, learning to see what they were never meant to see. There were forms within the brilliance, not quite figures but suggestions of presence, of intention. I thought of the descriptions in Torah, of the angels at Sinai, of the glory that filled the temple in Solomon's time. I thought of every religious text I had ever taught, every ancient account I had dismissed as metaphor or exaggeration or the product of pre-scientific minds trying to explain natural phenomena. I had been so arrogant, so certain that I understood the difference between myth and reality. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it changed. The light contracted, pulling back into itself like a breath being drawn in. For just a moment, I swear this on everything I hold sacred, I heard something, not with my ears, with something deeper. A sound that was also a feeling, a knowing. It wasn't words, but if I had to translate it into human language, it would be something like, remember, prepare. The time is closer than you believe. And then it was gone. The normal evening light returned, ordinary, earthly, almost offensive in its mundane quality after what we had witnessed. The sky was the same pale orange and purple of any Jerusalem sunset. The dome of the rock gleamed gold in the last rays of the sun, exactly as it always did. Birds that had gone silent began to call again. The distant traffic noise that I hadn't noticed disappearing now returned. For several long moments, no one moved. We all remained frozen, on our knees or standing in shock, staring at the empty air above the Temple Mount, where something impossible had just occurred. Then came the sirens. They arrived within minutes, far too quickly to be a normal response. Police vehicles, military jeeps, black SUVs with no markings. They flooded into the plaza with the organized chaos of a planned operation. As if they had been waiting. As if they had known this might happen. Everyone remained calm, an officer announced through a megaphone, first in Hebrew, then Arabic, then English. Please clear the area in an orderly fashion. There is no emergency. We are conducting a routine security sweep. Routine security sweep. The words were so absurd given what we had just witnessed that I almost laughed, except I couldn't. My body was still shaking, my mind still reeling, trying to process what my eyes had shown me and what my rational brain insisted could not be real. Uncle David, I'm scared. Jonathan whispered, pressing against my side. I know. We're okay. I put my arm around him, trying to project a confidence I absolutely did not feel. People were slowly getting to their feet, looking at each other with wide, shocked eyes. I saw that same expression on every face. Orthodox Jews, Muslim worshippers, Christian pilgrims, secular tourists, all of us united in the same stunned disbelief, the same certainty that we had witnessed something beyond explanation. A woman near us, she was American, I could tell by her accent, was arguing with a police officer. But we all saw it, everyone here saw it, you can't just— Ma'am, please cooperate, the officer said firmly. There was an unusual atmospheric phenomenon. We ask that you do not spread unverified information that could cause public panic. Atmospheric phenomenon? She repeated incredulously. That's what you're calling it? I've seen the northern lights. I've seen ball lightning. That was not— Ma'am. The officer's voice hardened. Please proceed to the exit. I pulled Jonathan closer and started moving toward the Western Wall Plaza exit. All around us, more officers were dispersing the crowd, their movements efficient and practiced. Too practiced. As if they had done this before, or had been trained specifically for this scenario. That's when I noticed the men in civilian clothes. They weren't wearing uniforms, but they moved with authority, speaking into earpieces, pointing at people in the crowd. One of them was photographing faces. Another was confiscating cell phones, writing down names and information. Sir, I need to see your device, one of these men said, stepping in front of me. He was young, maybe 30, with the hard eyes of someone who had seen combat. My device? I repeated stupidly. Your phone, your nephew's phone, any recording devices. Why? Security concerns. Any footage taken in the last 30 minutes must be reviewed for sensitive information. We didn't take any footage of— I started. But Jonathan's grip on my arm tightened painfully. I looked down at him. His face had gone pale. I recorded it, he whispered. Uncle David, I recorded the whole thing on my phone. The man in civilian clothes had heard. His eyes sharpened. The phone. Now. What authority do you have to— I began, feeling a surge of anger breaking through my shock. He pulled out an ID that he flashed too quickly for me to read clearly, though I caught the words Security Services and Emergency Powers Act. The phone, he repeated. This is not a request. Jonathan looked up at me, his eyes pleading. That video was the proof. The evidence that what we had experienced was real. I knew that if we handed it over, we would never see it again. It would disappear into some classified archive, denied and dismissed like so many other inexplicable events that challenge official narratives. But what choice did we have? I was a teacher. I had no legal standing, no authority, no protection against whatever power this man represented. Give it to him. I said quietly to Jonathan. But uncle, give it to him. With trembling hands, Jonathan pulled out his phone and handed it over. The man took it, tapped the screen a few times, then removed something from his pocket, a small device that he connected to the phone's port. Within seconds, he nodded and disconnected it. Thank you for your cooperation, he said, handing the phone back. The screen was black. Jonathan pressed the power button. Nothing happened. You broke it, Jonathan protested. Unfortunate technical failure, the man said without emotion. These things happen. You'll find a claim form on the municipality website for damaged personal property. Have a good evening. He moved on to the next person, leaving us standing there with a dead phone and no proof of what we had witnessed. By now, the plaza was nearly empty. The organized evacuation had been ruthlessly efficient. Within 20 minutes of the light disappearing, they had cleared hundreds of witnesses, confiscated dozens of devices, and established a perimeter around the entire area. As we walked toward the exit, I heard an older man arguing loudly with an officer in Hebrew. You can't erase what we saw. You can't make us forget. God himself showed us a sign and you think you can just… Sir, you're creating a disturbance. I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately or you'll be detained. The old man's voice broke. They said this would happen. They said in the last days, when the signs appeared, the authorities would try to hide them, would try to keep the people in darkness. I couldn't hear the rest. We were being pushed along with the flow of people, shepherded out like sheep by dozens of security personnel. As we passed through the checkpoint, I saw more men with cameras, photographing everyone who left, creating a database, I realized, of everyone who had been present, everyone who had seen. We walked in silence through the Jewish quarter, the ancient stone alleys now feeling oppressive rather than beautiful. Tourists passed us, laughing and taking selfies, completely unaware that just minutes ago and meters away, something extraordinary had occurred. The disconnect between their cheerful normalcy and what we had experienced felt surreal, almost offensive. Uncle David, Jonathan said as we neared the Jaffa Gate. What do we do now? I don't know, I admitted. I honestly don't know. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text message from a number I didn't recognize. Do not discuss what you saw tonight. For your own safety and that of your family. This is not a threat. This is protection. What happened is beyond civilian understanding. Trust the proper authorities to handle it. Delete this message. I showed it to Jonathan. His face went even paler. They're watching us, he whispered. I think they're watching everyone who was there. But why? Uncle David, if it was really… He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't quite speak the implication aloud. I understood. Because if what we had witnessed was truly divine, truly a sign from God, then the authorities trying to suppress it were attempting to suppress the divine itself. And what did that make them? What did that make us for staying silent? We took the light rail back to my apartment in Rehavia. The city moved around us in its usual rhythms, people going to dinner, tourists consulting maps, teenagers laughing at bus stops. Jerusalem after sunset, exactly as it always was. Except it wasn't. Everything had changed, even if only those of us who had been there could feel it. Later that night, after I had made sure Jonathan was settled in the guest room, I sat alone in my study and searched online for any mention of what had happened. Nothing. Not a single news report, not a social media post, not even a conspiracy theory. Forum discussing it. That was impossible. Hundreds of people had been there. In the age of smartphones and instant communication, someone should have managed to post something before their devices were confiscated. Unless they had been prepared. Unless they had somehow known it might happen and had systems in place to immediately suppress any information. The thought was terrifying. I found my hand shaking as I typed into the search bar. Temple Mount Light phenomenon. Nothing. Relevant. Jerusalem sign from God. Just historical references and tourism sites. Apparition over Dome of the Rock. Nothing. It was as if it had never happened. But I knew it had. My body knew it. That feeling of being seen, of being judged and known completely, was still with me, would probably be with me forever. You don't imagine something like that. You don't hallucinate a collective experience shared by hundreds of witnesses. They were covering it up, successfully. I thought of that text. Message. For your own safety and that of your family. I thought of my daughter in Haifa, my ex-wife, my elderly mother. What would happen if I spoke out? What could happen? But then I thought of that moment. The light, the presence, the unspoken message that had penetrated my very soul. Remember, prepare. The time is closer than you believe. If I stayed silent, wasn't I complicit in hiding something that the world might need to know? I sat there in the dark of my study, the city lights of Jerusalem glowing beyond my window, and realized that my ordinary life had ended. Whatever came next, whatever consequences followed, I could never go back to the comfortable certainty of before. I had seen something true, and truth, I was learning, was the most dangerous thing of all. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that light, felt that overwhelming presence. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up trying and sat in my living room with a cup of coffee, staring at nothing, my mind spinning in circles. My phone buzzed. Another message from an unknown number, but not the same one as before. You were at the Temple Mount tonight. So was I. We need to talk. Meet me at Café Kadosh on Rav Kook Street tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone. I know you're frightened. So am I. But silence is not safety. Rachel G. I stared at the message for a long time. It could be a trap. It could be security services testing who would respond, who would be willing to talk. But something in the message's tone felt genuine. The admission of fear, the simple directness. The next morning, I told Jonathan I had errands to run and he should stay at the apartment. He didn't argue. He'd been quiet since the night before, withdrawn into himself in a way that worried me. But I didn't know how to help him when I couldn't even process what had happened myself. Café Kadosh was busy when I arrived, full of tourists and locals enjoying the autumn sunshine. I ordered coffee and found a table near the back, watching the door. She arrived exactly at 2. A woman in her 40s wearing a simple blue dress and headscarf, her face lined with worry but also with fierce intelligence. She scanned the cafe, spotted me, I'd told her I'd be wearing a blue jacket, and walked over. "David?" she asked quietly. "Rachel?" She sat down, glancing around nervously before speaking in a low voice. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure anyone would respond." "You sent messages to others?" "To everyone whose face I could clearly remember from last night. About 40 people. You're the third to agree to meet." She paused as a waiter came to take her order, waiting until he left before continuing. "They confiscated my phone too, erased everything. But I work in IT security. I know how to recover deleted data, and I know how to hide information where they can't find it." My heart began to beat faster. "You have footage?" "I had footage," she corrected. "They wiped it from my device, but not before I'd already uploaded it to an encrypted cloud server. And before you ask, yes, I've watched it multiple times. It's real. It happened. We didn't imagine it." The relief that flooded through me was overwhelming. Thank God. I've been questioning my own sanity, wondering if somehow we all experienced some kind of mass hysteria or... "That's what they want us to think," Rachel interrupted. "That's exactly the response they're counting on. Isolated witnesses questioning themselves, too afraid or uncertain to speak out. But I've been researching. This isn't the first time." "What do you mean?" She pulled out a tablet from her bag, keeping it angled so only I could see the screen. 3 years ago, there was an incident at the Western Wall. Late at night, after official visiting hours, a group of yeshiva students reported seeing an angelic presence during their prayers. Their phones were confiscated, they were questioned for hours, and within a week there were news. Reports about hallucinogenic incense being sold near the old city, suggesting they'd been drugged. "I remember hearing about that," I said slowly, "but it was dismissed as exactly what the authorities wanted it dismissed as." And then, 5 years before that, there was the incident at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Orthodox pilgrims reported a divine light during Easter services. Same pattern, immediate suppression, confiscated evidence, official explanations about unusual reflections and heightened emotional states. She scrolled through more documents. I found references going back decades. Small incidents, always quickly contained, always officially explained away. But David, I think something has changed. This time was different. Bigger, more public, hundreds of witnesses instead of dozens. They're going to have a much harder time containing this one. "But they're trying," I said. "That's obvious." "Of course they are. Think about what it would mean if they acknowledged it officially. The religious implications alone would be staggering. Every faith would claim it as validation. The political ramifications in a place like Jerusalem. The Temple Mount is already the most volatile religious site on earth. If governments admitted that something genuinely supernatural occurred there." She shook her head. "They have every incentive to suppress it. So what do? We document everything. We find other witnesses. We preserve testimony before people convince themselves it didn't happen or become too frightened to speak. And, she hesitated, we try to understand what it was. What it means. The message, I said quietly. Did you feel it too? The communication that wasn't in words? Her eyes widened. Yes. Remember, prepare. Like a warning, but also a promise. A promise of what? I don't know. But I've been reading scriptures. Torah, Bible, Quran, everything I can find about signs and prophecies. Every tradition speaks of times when heaven would reveal itself to earth, when the barriers between divine and human would thin, usually associated with, she swallowed hard, with the end times, with major transitions, with judgment. The word hung between us, heavy and frightening. You think this is about the end of the world? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I think this is about the end of something, she said carefully. The end of an era, maybe. The end of our ability to pretend that the material world is all that exists. David, what we saw, it was undeniable. It was more real than this table, than this coffee, than anything in our everyday lives. That kind of truth changes everything. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Then hers. Then phones all around us in the cafe began to chime with incoming alerts. I pulled out my phone and saw a breaking news notification. Official statement on yesterday's incident at Temple Mount. Atmospheric reflection phenomenon fully explained. Rachel. And I read it simultaneously, our faces reflecting the same growing anger and disbelief. The statement claimed that a rare but documented meteorological event had caused sunlight to reflect off atmospheric ice crystals in an unusual way, creating the appearance of luminous phenomena. It cited scientific papers, included quotes from atmospheric physicists, and concluded that while the sight was undoubtedly beautiful and moving, it was entirely natural and had been observed in other locations around the world. There were even photographs, clearly doctored, clearly fake, but convincing enough if you hadn't been there. This is propaganda, Rachel said flatly. Professional, well-resourced propaganda. Around us in the cafe, people were reading the same news, nodding, some laughing at how seriously people had apparently taken a natural light show. I heard one tourist say to another, "See? I told you there was a rational explanation. People always jump to supernatural conclusions when it's just science they don't understand." The dismissal in his voice, the easy certainty, made my blood boil. "They're winning," I said quietly. "Already. Within 24 hours, they've controlled the narrative completely." "Not completely," Rachel said, her jaw set with determination. "We're still here. We know the truth. And there are others. That old man who was arguing with the police last night, I got his name, Moshe Stern. He's a respected rabbi, teaches at a yeshiva in Mea Shearim. If we could get him to speak publicly, they've probably already gotten to him, warned him, threatened him, whatever it takes. Maybe. But we have to try." She looked at me intently. "David, I can't do this alone. I need help. Are you willing to be part of this? To risk what might come with speaking out?" I thought of Yonatan, of that broken phone, of the message warning me to stay silent. I thought of my comfortable life, my teaching position, my family. Then I thought of that moment of divine truth, of being seen and known completely, of the message that had bypassed my ears and spoken directly to my soul. "Remember, prepare." "Yes," I said. "I'm willing." Over the next 3 weeks, Rachel and I became investigators of our own experience. We found 12 other witnesses willing to speak, to document their testimony. Each had a similar story: the light, the presence, the overwhelming sense of being in contact with something beyond human understanding. And each had been visited, warned, threatened in subtle or not so subtle ways to remain silent. Moshe Stern, the rabbi I'd seen arguing with police that night, agreed to meet with us in his small study in Mea Shearim. He was 78 years old, with a long white beard, and eyes that had seen too much history to be easily intimidated. "I've waited my whole life to see something like this," he told us, his voice rough with emotion. "My grandfather survived the Holocaust. He told me that in the camps, in the darkest,